What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Derek and Cody, with you as always. Guys, we wanted to talk again about Anthony Richardson and his NFL debut and kind of just put the numbers and the first game into perspective a little bit. We kind of talked about it right after the game, and emotions can be high, or you're thinking of one thing and not really thinking of another, but it usually takes that 24 hours to kind of put everything into perspective and see where you're at with Anthony Richardson. Now, I will start this video off, and Cody, you will shake your head in agreement here with this. This is the first game of Anthony Richardson and this new tenure with this quarterback and this coach and this coaching staff and everything we have going on. It is the first game. So let's everybody calm down a minute on the expectation or on the digression of how Anthony Richardson did, and let's just take the numbers for what they are for him still needing time. But nevertheless, Anthony Richardson yesterday completed 65% of his passes, 223 passing yards, 1 touchdown to 1 interception with a QB rating of a 79. Also had 10 rushes for 40 yards and a touchdown. Now, to put it into perspective as well, no NFL quarterback has ever thrown for 200 passing yards, ran for over 40 rushing yards, and scored a touchdown both passing and rushing in their NFL debut ever. Anthony Richardson is the first one to ever do it. So that is quite interesting of a stat line to think about, Cody, because I'll just admit it from the very beginning. I did not think Anthony Richardson was going to do well at all in this game. I'll come out and say it right now. I had no expectations for Anthony Richardson because I thought he's going to struggle. He's going to have issues. I thought he's going to miss a ton of throws. I thought he would look a lot worse than what he did on Sunday night. And I know you have some more stats to kind of put his numbers into perspective here. So I'll let you go ahead and hop into those.
Yeah, well, first, before I do that, I definitely agree with you. Put it in perspective. Anthony Richardson, this is his first career start. Again, really his, 14th career game that matters from, college to the NFL. So, put that in perspective. We knew he was going to be raw, that, we knew he just needed game experience. So, on both sides, Derek, whether it was the people saying he was incredible, whether it was the people saying he was really bad, or whatever it was. I think for the most part, most fans and most media came away pretty impressed, but overall, knew that there was still, a lot to be desired, as we all expected, him being a very inexperienced and raw rookie at this point in terms of playing experience. But yeah, to put it into perspective here, I wanted to kind of compare, and shout out to my friend Alex Golden, our fellow Blue Wire podcast over doing the Pacers stuff. He put a really cool stat out there, kind of comparing the last 3 quarterbacks the Colts had taken, in the first round. That being obviously Peyton Manning in 1998, Andrew Luck in 2012, and Anthony Richardson in 2023 here. So just for comparison's sake, again, remember Peyton Manning, his first rookie year was not great. He threw I think it's still the record in terms of interceptions in the season for a rookie. He still did that. He struggled. Andrew Luck obviously fared a little bit better and led the Colts to the playoffs in his first year. And then obviously now with Anthony Richardson being the third quarterback, really the third franchise guy the Colts have taken here in the last 30 years. So putting that all into perspective, here were some of the stats that he kind of put out. First off, Peyton Manning, his first career game in 1998 with the Colts, he was 21 of 37, 302 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, and 3 interceptions. Andrew Luck was 23 of 45 in his first game, 309 passing yards. He ran it 2 times for 9 yards. He had a passing touchdown and 3 interceptions, and he also had a fumble. So 4 turnovers for Andrew Luck. And then obviously Anthony Richardson, we talked about 24 of 37, 223 passing yards, a passing touchdown, 10 rushes for 40 yards, a rushing touchdown, and an interception. So, Derek, what I see here from this, and again, we can't say it enough and stress it enough. This is his first ever game. So, like, putting that in perspective, though, I thought Anthony Richardson, comparing the stats, obviously had less passing yards, but turned the ball over less and scored more than these two guys. Now, I'm not saying he's going to go be a better quarterback than either of these guys. That's not what I'm saying. But strictly from a first game experience, I would say Anthony Richardson played better. I don't know if you'd agree with that or disagree with that, but the fact that he was more efficient in terms of pass percentage, the fact that he had 2 touchdowns and only 1 turnover, I don't know, man. To me, that screams he was better in his first game, or statistically, he was better in his first game than Luck and Manning were in their first career games. So I just wanted to put that into perspective there. That's how he stacks up stats-wise. We've said again, stats can be misleading at times, but that's statistically, Anthony Richardson had a better rookie debut than those 2 franchise quarterbacks for the Indianapolis Colts. So just wanted to put that in there, put that perspective in there, because I thought it was interesting to kind of compare the pure stats for these 3 quarterbacks and kind of just put it in perspective, honestly, how surprised. I know you said you were, and I was honestly surprised how efficient he was, right? Especially in terms of the completion percentage, because we were hearing, gosh, this guy's not going to be able to even complete half his passes. It was that way in college, right around 50-some percent, 55%. Wasn't great in the completion percentage standpoint in the preseason, but he comes out and completes 65% of his passes, and that's pretty darn impressive for a week 1 game. So just wanted to put that in perspective there.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, when we look at their stats versus this, I mean, the big question was I don't think Anthony Richardson is ever going to quite get the yards that Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck were able to acquire throughout their career, because Anthony Richardson is just not quite that kind of guy. And I mean, as it stands currently, I mean, you cannot even compare Richardson's weapons with Peyton Manning's weapons. You can't do that at all. Even with Andrew Luck, Andrew never had a ton of help, but he always did have a bona fide number 1 that took over games whenever he needed him to.
He had prime Reggie Wayne and also had T.Y. Hilton his rookie year. So he had definitely had some guys. And obviously Peyton Manning had Marvin Harrison his first year. So, yeah, I mean, certainly from the number 1 guy, I mean, it was clear that those 2 guys had better weapons than the Colts currently do in terms of that guy.
Yeah. And then I think it's also just in the state of, when you look at, we were mentioning it before recording this, and it's been spread around social media, kind of looking at the passing chart for Anthony Richardson in this game. I think only like 2 throws of over 20 plus yards in this game. It's clear that the Colts had a plan for Anthony Richardson, and that was to not, be throwing the ball deep too often. They wanted to focus on hitting the small stuff, getting him in a rhythm, making him throw to one side, get something going. And it's kind of weird because, a lot of Colts fans, Cody, were arguing about Richardson not taking the risks, while at the same time, he was efficient at the short and mid-range game, which is hilarious because the majority of people would have told you that that's what they were most concerned about with Anthony Richardson when they drafted him. It's not about his ability to throw the football deep. We know he can throw the football deep, but is he going to actually be able to complete all of his passes within a 20-yard mark? And he completed 65% of them on Sunday. So, I mean, in retrospect, I mean, it's kind of funny to see how people kind of shifted the tone of it, of saying, well, we don't want him to really throw the football short, when in actuality, that's where 80% of your throws are going to be, is normally within 10 yards. So it's something to think about. And of course, like I said, Steichen had a plan. Steichen had things to, had tried to get Richardson in that rhythm. Do you think that their lack of throwing the ball deep had mainly to do with Steichen's game plan, or do you think it was more of Richardson just not wanting to take too many risks?
I think it was more of the game plan from what we heard, right? They said that they had schemed some up, but Jacksonville just kind of took that part of the field away, And so I think it was more of that. I still would have liked to see the Colts at least attempt a couple, just to keep them honestly back there, but I think it's a positive step because, like you mentioned, like we know Anthony Richardson can throw the ball deep. Heck, we've seen him do it in the preseason, right? We saw him do it in college. So the fact that he threw 65% in the really short to intermediate game is very encouraging. Again, he is not anywhere close to where he needs to be when it comes to that. But the fact, we were saying, if you could throw low 60s, that's pretty good. We would feel really good about that. So mid 60s, you'll take that all day long. And so, yeah, I was pretty encouraged with kind of his progress, especially some of the things we saw, in camp and in the preseason, and obviously at his time in Florida too, where he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn sometimes, the fact that he's improving, not, to the point where he needs to be yet for sure, but the fact that he's showing improvement and in week 1 he showed that, I think that's very, very encouraging. Now, I do think the Colts will dial it up as they get it going. I really do think they will. But I think Jacksonville did a really good job of kind of eliminating that aspect of the Colts and what they wanted to do. And give them credit where it's due. I thought they did a good job of doing that. But yeah, I definitely want to see them, sling it a little bit more with Richardson because that's what he does well. But definitely encouraging to see him, at least out there in week number 1, performing pretty well in that department. So felt good about that.
And I mean, I would also indicate that it probably was a lot harder to throw the football deep, Cody, because you had the week 1 worst ability of rushing the football. I mean, that also doesn't help, is that the Jaguars were keeping their safeties back because they were not afraid of the Colts' ability to run the football. So you keep more defenders all the way in the backfield, and there's less guys open 20, 30 yards down the field because they're not afraid of Indianapolis running the football. So that probably didn't help at all. And to put into perspective here of how Richardson did with all the other quarterbacks, remember, we all said that Richardson is the least finished product of all of these guys. Well, we all saw in week 1, Levis didn't play. He obviously was an inactive. CJ Stroud in his first game against the Ravens completed 63.5% of his passes, 242 yards. No scores for CJ Stroud, and with a QB rating of a 78. And Bryce Young finished with a 52.5%, 146 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and with a rating of a 48.5. So, of course, Richardson might be in the best situation, Cody, when it comes to the offensive line's sake of everything. I mean, no doubt that the Texans' offensive line is terrible. And of course, the offensive line for Carolina is utterly terrible. But in this situation, it's week 1. It's one game. But Richardson looked like the best rookie quarterback and most poised quarterback of all of these guys. So it's only 1 week. It's a small sample size. As it goes along, Richardson may not have the best completion percentage or have the most touchdowns or have the best quarterback rating at the end of it all. But in week 1, I think it's safe to say that it's nice to see that Anthony Richardson, I think from where some of us thought he might be and how much more progression he might need to catch up with everyone else, I think it's safe to say, Cody, he's already there.
Yeah, and not to mention, I mean, I think you look at some of the teams that these other quarterbacks were facing. Now, again, we can say that there are definitely some pieces on this roster that might be better than, say, Houston or Carolina. But you look at the teams, Carolina facing Atlanta. I know Atlanta has definitely improved in some areas, but I mean, the fact that the Panthers only scored 10 points, and the fact that they just got absolutely killed and Bryce Young didn't even throw for 200 yards. And then, you throw in the fact that Houston, obviously they were playing Baltimore. That was a little bit of a tougher game as well. But the fact that Richardson was able to do that against, a legitimate AFC contender in Jacksonville and perform well doing that. I mean, I thought that was definitely a good thing. So, yeah, I mean, I posted something on Twitter yesterday, Derek, and it was just kind of like interesting. I'm like, can you imagine what the uproar would be if Anthony Richardson played like Bryce Young played? Can you imagine if he had a 50 completion percentage, 2 turnovers, didn't even have 200 yards passing, and you got absolutely wrecked by Jacksonville? Like, can you imagine what the uproar, what the the outcry would be from the fan base? And so I'm very encouraged with where Anthony Richardson is and the progression he has clearly taken, and the fact that he might be further along than a lot of us have thought, Derek. Not to say he is anywhere near finished, because he clearly still has a long way to go to be considered a great quarterback in this league. But given all the circumstances, given the fact that he had 0 running game, given the fact that he was under duress a lot, I was pretty impressed, all things considered. He looked pretty poised. I would say out of all these quarterbacks, he probably looked the most poised out of any of these rookies.
I would just say this. I would say, if you could tell me at the end of the year that if he kept this pace all year long, and you're telling me Anthony Richardson would finish the year with a 63% completion percentage, passing for 3,500 yards, having 17 to 20 touchdowns, and having 17 interceptions with 10 touchdowns rushing throughout the year, I would say that would be a very successful rookie campaign, given what we thought he might need to still do, and knowing how he's going to get better because he's the guy that needs the most experience. So, I mean, I'm just saying, of all things, if you're just going to project it and that's where he would end up, then I'd be very happy with this kind of performance. It at least keeps you in the situation where you know that your team can compete with anyone. That was a very good Jacksonville team that they faced a week 1, very difficult. Shane Steichen had them I think, much more prepared, Cody, in this week 1 than in week 1s in past by the previous coaching staff. Clearly, Steichen has a few things to work on. The whole team has some things to work on, but yesterday, it definitely gave you a little bit more of a glare of hope in what you're seeing from Richardson and the rest of this team going forward.
Absolutely. It's crazy how, the narrative for so long was that Richardson's going to need the most work. He's probably going to look the worst starting out. And again, it's only week 1, but it's just kind of ironic in a way how, that was kind of the narrative all year long, leading up all off season long, was Richardson's probably going to look the worst right away. And so far, through week 1, he looked the best. So the fact that the only negative with this guy was just the experience, like you said, he's only going to get better. And that should excite Colts fans. That should excite people who cover and watch this team, because if that's what an inexperienced Anthony Richardson looks like, can you imagine a guy that has 15, 17 even games under his belt, what he's going to look like going into year number 2? Can you just imagine the big difference it's going to be if he continues with how he's already progressed? If that progression continues, Derek, I'm just saying, man, it's not going to be very long until he's really in the conversation for one of those top teams in one of the top quarterback spots in the AFC. Again, could completely go south, but if this is any indication of how much he's going to continue to improve, man, it's going to be exciting here. Honestly, sooner rather than later, because it's already exciting. If you just give this guy more reps, it's going to be so invaluable for his progression and for his development moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Let us know your thoughts on Anthony Richardson's debut. Did he meet your expectations? Did he exceed them? Did he underperform? We'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on it. But that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much again for all the continued support. And as always, guys, go Colts.